On Daf Gimel, we're up to V'ema, and that's approximately 12 lines down from the top. The first word in the line is V'ema. So the Gemara had proven that Rosh Hashana for Minyan Hashanim not possibly be Aleph Tishrei. That much we've proven. And that has to do with the fact that Aaron died in the month of Av, and we fast forward to the month of Shvat when Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Tochacha. So it's impossible, since the Torah testifies that Aaron's death and Moshe's Tochacha, Aaron's death in Bamidbar and Moshe's Tochacha in Dvar, both took place in the same year, the 40th year since Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we know that it's impossible for Rosh Hashanah to have been somewhere between the months of Shvat, of Av and Shvat. But again, in this case, Av and Shvat belong to the same year. So that means we've excluded as candidates for Rosh Hashanah L'Shanim El, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, and Shvat. Because again, all those months belong to the same year as Av. So we go from Av until Shvat, and we block off all those months, since they belong to the same year, as impossible candidates for being Rosh Hashanah L'Shana, because you can't wedge Rosh Hashanah between Av and Shvat. However, that leaves us with a number of other possible candidates. For example, Adar, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, these are all possible candidates, and we have not disproved them and excluded them from being Rosh Hashanah Lilanos, because even, for example, let's say the month of Iyar, after Nisan, would be I said Rosh Hashanah Lilanos, I meant Rosh Hashanah L'Shnei Malchus, L'Shnos Malchus. It could be, for example, that the month of Iyar would qualify as Rosh Hashanah. And you have no proof against that, because even if you assume that from let's say Shvat, which is Aaron's death, from Av, which is Aaron's death, until Shvat, when Moshe gave his Tochach at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, all those months belong to the same year. But once we move beyond the Av, just 1 second, let me just get this straight. Yeah, for example, let's go from, I got myself a little bit confused here. Let me just get this straight. Yeah. Aaron died in Av, correct? And Moshe Rabbeinu's Tochacha was in Shvat. What comes after Shvat? Whatever comes after Shvat could be Rosh Hashanah. That means Adar, and you could add Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. That's where we're going to start today. The Ema, Rosh Hashanah, the Iyar. Maybe Iyar is Rosh Hashanah for counting the years of Malchus, because we haven't yet disproven the candidacy of Iyar. So the Gemara answers, Lo Sal Kedaita. It's impossible. The Torah says in Shmos Perek Mem, Vayhi b'chodesh harishon, which is Nisan, B'shana shenis, which is the second year to Yetzias Mitzrayim, Be'echad lachodesh, on the first of Nisan, Hukam HaMishkan. So Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they established the Mishkan. Uksiv. Now we fast forward to Parshas Balos, Bamidbar Perek Yud, and there it says, with regard to what's called the Siluka Anon, Vayhi b'shana shenis, in the second year of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Chodesh Hasheni, which is Chodesh Iyar, because Nisan is the first month of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now we get to Iyar, the second month. And there was a Stalkut Ha'anon. So the Anon lifted itself up above the Mishkan. And the Gemara now analyzes Midakoi ben Nisan from the fact that the first pasuk, which addresses Hakomas HaMishkan, that was in Nisan. How are you? I'm just, we're doing a Daf Yomi, so it's always a pressure to get it all in and out. So that the Hakomas HaMishkan took place on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That we established. V'karilei Shana Shenis, and it's within the second year of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Now we get to the second pasuk that addresses Histalkus Anan, where the Anan went up from the Mishkan, and the Torah testifies that took place for Iyar, in the month of Iyar. So in other words, it's after Rosh Chodesh Iyar. We don't have an exact date in Iyar, but certainly from Rosh Chodesh Iyar and on, the V'karilei Shana Shenis, and yet it's still considered the same month, the same year for Yitzias Mitzrayim, the second year. Now, if you're going to postulate that Iyar is Rosh Hashanah, then by definition, Histalkus Ha'anan would have taken place in the third year, not in the second year, because Hakomas HaMishkan took place on Rosh Chodesh Nisan in the second year. If Histalkus Ha'anan took place afterwards, if it was in Iyar, then it would be the third year, V'karilei Shana Shenis. Bichlal, we have to derive from this, the Rosh Hashanah, that Iyar could not possibly be Rosh Hashanah. We are now on Daf Gimel. You have more Rosh Hashanah? Oh, great. So we're up to the Ema, which is approximately 15 lines down from the top. The Ema Rosh Hashanah Sivan. Right? We had a whole bunch of candidate months for Rosh Hashanah, and Sivan was on the list. Because Moshe Rabbeinu's harsh castigation took place in the month of Shvat, in the same year, the 40th year, as Av. So when we go beyond Shvat, we get to Sivan. So Sivan could now be Rosh Hashanah, as far as that minyan of Shonim that begins with Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Gemara says, we have to reject this as well. The Siv in the parsha of Matan Torah, B'chodesh HaShlishi, let's say, B'nei Yisrael V'Eretz Mitzrayim. So now we're talking about Sivan, right? Sivan is Chag HaShvuos. That's Matan Torah. And Im Isa, if you're going to tell me that Rosh Hashanah from Yitzias Mitzrayim is going to be the month of Sivan, then it should have said B'chodesh HaShlishi B'Shana HaShenis. Let's say B'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim. There are two words that are missing in this pasuk that were omitted, and that is Shana Hashenis, because we've already crossed into the second year once we hit Rosh Hashanah at Sivan. So if Sivan is Rosh Hashanah, then the Torah was given in the second year after Yitzias Mitzrayim, and the Torah should have pointed that out. The Torah is talking about what happened in the first year after Yitzias Mitzrayim. And if Matan Torah in Sivan took place in the second year, the Torah should have pointed that out. Okay, so you've convinced me that neither Iyar nor Sivan are candidates for Rosh Hashanah. The Ema Tammuz, the Ema Av, the Ema Adar. So we have 3 months, and we haven't disproven any of them, because all these months are after Shvat, meaning after the month in which Moshe Rabbeinu castigated the Jewish people. And yet all these months are before the death of Aaron. So we really haven't excluded these months. And as a result of these questions, the Gemara now introduces a whole new shita, a whole new view as to how we derive the conclusion that Aleph Nisan is Rosh Hashanah L'Melach. And Allah Amar Abelazar, Me'hacha, we bring it from a different pasuk. This pasuk addresses the building of the first bayis by Shlomo Melech in Divrei Yomi. Vayochel livnos b'chodesh hasheni. Now look at the next word, if you could underline it. Ba'sheni. Maybe that word is like a dangly word. It's repetitious, and we have to figure out what it means. What does it add to the pasuk? It could have said Vayochel livnos b'chodesh hasheni b'shnas arbol malchuso. In the second month. My Sheni. What is that extra word Sheni that the Torah repeats here? After it says Hasheni, it says Bashe. Lav, Sheni liyerech, shemonim bola malchusa. What we're talking about in the 4th year, the Malchus of Shlomo. And what it means is, by adding the word Sheni, that it's the 2nd month of the counting of his Malchus. In other words, the previous month, the month before Iyar, is going to be the month in which we begin counting the Malchus of Shlomo Melech, and that's Nisan. So from the fact that the Torah calls it Sheni, meaning the 2nd month going into this year of the Malchus, it means that the previous month, which is Nisan, is the new year as far as Malchus is concerned. That's Echad ben Nisan. And the entire drasha here of Rabbi Elazar is predicated on the premise that the word Basheni here is telling you it's the 2nd month into this year of the Malchus. So Maskif Laravino Viema perhaps Sheni Bachodesh. Maybe the word Sheni means it's the 2nd day in the month of Iyar. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the 2nd month to the counting of the new year of Malchus. And the Gemara rejects Ravina's question. Why didn't came? If you're right that it's Sheni Bachodesh and Sheni Bachodesh Behed Yahavik Sivre, the Torah should have said Sheni Bachodesh. It only says Sheni. If it would have been referring to the 2nd day of the month, it should be Hasheni Bachodesh, the 2nd day of the month. The Gemara is not happy with that either. The Ema Basheni B'Shabbos. Maybe Sheni means the 2nd day of the week on a Monday. And the Gemara rejects this for 2 reasons. Chada, first, Ashkan Sheni B'Shabbos. We don't find anywhere in Tanakh that the phrase Sheni B'Shabbos appears as the 2nd day in Shabbos. Of course, the Farshim will ask about the days of creation, because there it does say Sheni, and it means Sheni B'Shabbos. Vayerev Vayvoki Yom Sheni. But we don't learn any conclusions from Briyasel Shalom, from the creation of the world. But after creation, we don't find that the word Sheni could refer to Sheni B'Shabbos. And furthermore, take a look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, Chodesh Hasheni B'Sheni. So we have 2 words that are almost identical, and they're contiguous one to the other. Makish Sheni Basra, Sheni Kama. We should compare the 2nd Sheni with the first previous Sheni. Ma Sheni Kama Chodesh. It means the 2nd month. Af Sheni Basra, Chodesh Sheni. So the Gemara now actually accepts the drasha of Rabbi Eliezer, and we come to the conclusion, based on the establishment of the bias of Shlomo, that the Rosh Chodesh for Malachim, Rosh Hashanah, for Malachim is Aleph Nisan. Now we have a Brisa, and the Brisa is going to go back to the original limud, the drasha that we had, which was, if you recall, Rabbi Yochanan's drasha about comparing the months of Av, the death of Aaron, with the month of Shvat, the castigation of Moshe Rabbeinu. And even though, keep in mind, the Gemara didn't accept that because we had problems with Tammuz, Av, and Adar, but nevertheless, the thrust of the drasha is important. And as Tosfos is going to make a big deal in this Dibra Maskal Tanya at the bottom of the Yomut, that this Brisa combines both the drasha of Rabbi Yochanan with a summary and the drasha that we just learned to Rabbi Elazar. And Tosfos works out why we need both drashas. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan. How do we know that Rosh Hashanah L'Malachim is Nisan? Shenemar Vayhi b'Shmonim Shana v'Arba'amos Shana. Let's say Bnei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim. So we're talking about 480 years after Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then the pasuk says, "Who HaChodesh Hasheni L'Mloch Shlomo al Yisrael. So we have an equation in this passage between the Malchus of Shlomo and Yetzias Mitzrayim. And just like in Yetzias Mitzrayim, we start counting from Nisan, so to the Malchus of Shlomo. The years of the reign of Shlomo as king, we begin to count with Nisan. How do we know that Yetzias Mitzrayim we count from Nisan? The Chsiv, Vayal Aaron HaKohen al Hor HaHor al Pi Hashem. This is the story of the death of Aaron. Uksiv Vayhi Barboim Shana Vashtei Asar Chodesh. And the pasuk says at the beginning of Dvarim that in the 11th month, which is the month of Shvat, Moshe Rabbeinu gives the Tochacha to Klal Yisrael. Uksiv, and then it says in the very next pasuk, V'acharei hakoso es Sichon, after the destruction of Sichon at the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that certainly took place after the death of Aaron, because when Aaron died, Sichon was still alive and well, alive and kicking, as we say. The Omer and the pasuk says, "Vayishma Knani," when Sichon, who's called the Knani, heard about the death of Aaron and the siluk of the Anani HaKavod, he said, now it's time to attack the Jewish people. The Omer, Vayiru kol ha'eda ki gava Aaron, and we read the word Vayiru, not that they saw, but rather they were seen, which means that the Anani HaKavod that surrounded them and concealed them was now removed after the death of Aaron, because the Anani HaKavod was chutz Aaron. So we know now that this entire episode that is recorded in Sefer Bamidbar about the destruction of Sichon took place after the death of Aaron. The Omer. So we know now that when Moshe gave his Tochacha in Shvat, which was after the death of Aaron, and yet it was in that same year, the 40th year of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we know now that Rosh Hashana for Minyan Shana in Yetzias Mitzrayim could not possibly be any month between Av and Shvat. Between the death of Aaron and the castigation of Moshe in Shvat, the Omer and the pasuk says, "Vayhi b'chodesh harishon b'shana shenis hukam Mishkan." In the first month, in the second year, which means Nisan of the second year after Yetzias Mitzrayim, they established the Mishkan. The Omer and the pasuk says in Parshas Ba'aloscha, "Vayhi b'shana shenis b'chodesh hasheni na'aleh ha'ana." So when the pasuk addresses Hakamas HaMishkan, it was in Nisan, and it's called the second year of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now we get to the pasuk that addresses Histalkus Ha'ana, and that was in the following year. And it's also called Bashana Shenis. So the Stalkus Ha'ana, like the Hakamas HaMishkan, both took place in the same year, Shana Shenis. It means that Rosh Hashanah for Yetzias Mitzrayim could not possibly be Chodesh Adar, because it was Chodesh Adar when the Stalkus Ha'ana took place. That would be already Shana Shlishes. The Omer, and with regard to Matan Torah, it says, B'chodesh hashlishi l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael. So Rosh Hashanah for Yetzias Mitzrayim is not Nisan, because we're talking now Chodesh hashlishi, which is Sivan. So I'm sorry, I said Rosh Hashanah couldn't have been in Nisan. I'm sorry, that was a slip of the tongue. What I meant to say was Rosh Hashanah Yetzias Mitzrayim could not have been in Sivan, because if it were in Sivan, then the pasuk should have added the words Bashana Shenis. The Omer, and the pasuk says explicitly that Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim is Nisan, because it says Vayachal Livnos. Now the Brisa ends up by quoting the drasha of Rabbi Lazar from the building of the Mikdash of Shlomo HaMelech. Vayachal Livnos, and it says B'chodesh Hasheni Ba'Sheni, which means Chodesh Hasheni is Iyar. And it's the second month to the Sheni, meaning it's the second month to the year, to the beginning of the year of counting for Shnos HaMalachim, which was in Nisan. And then Tosfos Dir Maskal Tanya says that even though the Gemara says Tani Kavasi to Rabbi Yochanan, Lav Lafuki to Rabbi Lazar, the Maisi Nami to Rabbi Lazar about price. Gemara here at the end quotes Vayachal Livnos B'Chodesh Hasheni B'Sheni, which is the drasha of Rabbi Lazar. So when it says Tani Kavasi to Rabbi Yochanan, it doesn't mean to exclude Rabbi Lazar. So now Tosfos addresses the question. So why do we need both drashas? Why is it necessary to have both the drasha of Rabbi Lazar and the previous drasha of Rabbi Yochanan from the death of Aaron and its relationship to the castigation that Moshe gave? It says, "B'krad Rabbi Lazar Sagi." If we only had the pasuk of Rabbi Lazar, that would not be sufficient. I would have said, Dilish Shlomo, that it's true that we count the years of Shlomo HaMelech's reign from Nisan. Vadi Avisheni Liyerech, Shemonim Lo Malchuso, Lefisha Amad B'Nisan. Since Shlomo HaMelech was in fact appointed king in the month of Nisan, then it makes sense to say that Chodesh Hasheni Liyerech, which is the Yerech Shemonim Lo Malchuso, would be Iyar. Shar Malachim Lo, there's no proof from other Malachim. It's Lachi Tarth Nami, we need now Rabbi Yochanan's Hekesh Tzitzis. Now the Mishnah had already told us that Echad B'Nisan is Rosh Hashanah L'Malachim, and now the Gemara analyzes what Malachim, what kings are we talking about? You're talking about the beginning of the year of the reign of the king on Aleph Nisan. Which kings? We're talking about Jewish kings. Aval Malchei Umas HaOlam. Tishrei Manina. The Umas HaOlam are controlled by Brias Olam. They live in the natural world, and that begins with Aleph Tishrei. And therefore, according to Rav Chizda, our Mishnah that establishes Echad B'Nisan as Rosh Hashanah L'Malachim could only be relevant to Malchei Yisrael. Shenemar, I'll prove it to you from the beginning of Sefer Nehemiah, the very opening pasuk, Divrei Nehemiah ben Chachalia, Vayehi b'chodesh Kislev b'shnas Esrim. And the psukim there will relate a discussion between someone by the name of Hanani, his friend, meaning Nehemiah's friend Hanani, about the situation and the plight of the Jews that were left in Yerushalayim after the destruction of the temple. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Uksiv, but it says immediately afterwards, when Nehemiah speaks to the king of Persia, and he says to him that, you know what I heard from Hanani? I heard the terrible situation of the Jews in Yerushalayim. Can you, the king of Persia, who was then one of the rare cases in history, someone who was sympathetic to the Jewish cause, would you be able to help us and alleviate the suffering of the Jews in Yerushalayim? That's when Nehemiah packs up and goes to Yerushalayim. The pasuk says, "Uksiv, Vayehi b'chodesh Nisan, shnas esrim l'artachshasta." Now, Rav Chizda is now going to present his proof. Midakoi b'Kislev. The first pasuk, it says explicitly, "Vayehi b'chodesh Kislev," v'karile, and it's called Shnas Esrim, and it's the 20th year. V'kai, and the pasuk in that same chapter that comes right afterwards is discussing Nisan, because it says Vayehi b'chodesh Nisan. So we started with Kislev, and then we continued to Nisan. V'karile Shnas Esrim. And yet, he calls it the 20th year of the king, of the reign of the king. Mechlal, the Rosh Hashanah, Lav, Nisan. You cannot say the Rosh Hashanah was in Nisan, because Nisan was the month of the 20th year. Now, how could Nisan be the 20th year when Kislev was the 20th year? If Nisan establishes a new year as far as Minyan HaMalachim is concerned, it would have to be 21. It couldn't have been 20. And Rav Chizda says by process of elimination, if Rosh Chodesh Nisan is not Rosh Hashanah Lemalche Umos Ha'olam, then the fallback position has got to be Aleph Tishrei, because that's the only other candidate for Rosh Hashanah. And Tosas Dibra Master Mechlal asks the question, you could have a number of different candidate months between 6 months between Nisan and Tishrei. Yeshlover Shehem Rosh Hashanah. Tosas answers, we come and hold the Afki Afikte. Nisan Ukme Tishrei Ta'achtan Rosh Hashanah Lekamet Varim L'Shmitin Uliyochel. So no, there's none of those months are candidates for Rosh Hashanah. Once we've excluded Nisan, then the fallback position is Tishrei. And now the Gemara is going to attack Rav Chizda's proof. Bishlema hech. I can understand the second pasuk, which explicitly mentions Chodesh Nisan, and it mentions Shnas Esrim. It's the 20th year of the kingship of this Artach Shasta. Mefaresh. It's explicit. Ella, hi, but let's go back to the first pasuk in Chodesh Kislev. There too, it says what? Shnas Esrim. But it doesn't say Esrim lit. That's omitted from the pasuk. In the second pasuk, when we get to Nisan, it's Esrim lit. But here it doesn't mention that it's the 20th year. In the first pasuk of Chodesh Kislev, it doesn't mention that it's the 20th year of Artachshasa. Dilma, perhaps, if I want to be argumentative about it, maybe the pasuk is talking about the 20th year Limin Yonah Chrina. Who? Meaning it's some other event, a major event that took place.